And we're live. Welcome to the Sports Sesh podcast. I'm your host, Mason Shatwell, and my co-host is James Evans. And again, we've not got James today, but who needs James when you got Kyle the Monster Nelson on? How you doing, Kyle?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. The nickname, I've got to ask, where did it come from?
So it's just kind of something that people always refer to me in the training room. After training and stuff, people would always say, "Oh man, you're a monster" and stuff like that, and it just kind of stuck.
Well, before we get on to you specifically, I put on Instagram, as you know, if anybody had any questions, and there's been a few. And the one I was going to ask you that someone's asked is, when you were a child, were you a peanut butter and jelly or a bologna sandwich type of kid?
Bologna and ketchup.
Yeah, that's a question that I had two or three people asking. I don't know why, but there's your answer, guys. Yeah, I'll go back to your last fight. I know it didn't go your way against Billy Quarantillo, but what would you say went wrong in that fight for you?
I think it was just the weight cut. I think I've just been putting on more and more muscle over the years, and just to get down to 145 now. When we got that fight, it wasn't on super short notice, but I think we had 4 and a bit weeks or something like that. So just to get down to that 145-pound division, it takes a lot of work for me. And I think just in that fight, I wasn't able to recover 100%. We saw in the first round that my striking, even my takedown defense, like I stuffed a lot of his takedowns, stuff like that, and had no problems, even working on the fence. And yes, I feel like skill wise, I was great. I think I could have beat him skill wise. Just once we got kind of past the first 3 minutes of the fight, I started to slow down, and then in the second round, I really started to slow down. And then in the third round, I really didn't have anything left. So it was all I could do to get up off the stool, and then I tried to move my feet, and they didn't listen. Tried to move my hands, didn't really listen. And he was able to come over and land a good shot.
Well, with you saying it was a tough weight cut, do you think for your next fight we'd be able to see you at 155 potentially?
Yeah, that's the plan. Yeah, my manager's talking to UFC about going up to 155.
Do you have any names in mind that you'd like to step in the octagon with?
So there's a guy, Justin James. He's also kind of fought at 145 and 155. Just somebody kind of mentioned it on Twitter, and I said I was in, and he said he's in. So now we just need to get the UFC to give us a date.
Do you have a date that you'd like to be back in there by?
I'm pretty much ready now. So, I think they're kind of booked up, the next little bit. So maybe March or April or something, they can get me on a card.
Yeah, there's obviously, as we've seen, there's some great cards coming up in the next few weeks, months, and I'm sure 2021 is going to be a great year. Something I'm always interested to ask fighters, because everyone has their own different path, as you say. How did you get into MMA specifically?
So it started with boxing. When I was really young, I saw Rocky for the first time, and I started watching, that whole series, and obviously that inspired me a lot. So I wanted to be a boxer. But coming from a small town in Huntsville, Ontario, it wasn't until I was going into grade 9 when I was 14 that I got a little more serious about it and started looking around. And I was able to find a kickboxing gym that was about a half hour away. So I started going there. They did kickboxing and jiu-jitsu, so I was doing, standing and ground work at the same time. And it was shortly after that I saw the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and that's what kind of gave me the inspiration to go into mixed martial arts.
Well, I know when I speak to people, everyone, again, has their own different answers. For me, basically, I was going to ask, what's your favourite part of mixed martial arts? And I've noticed that a lot of people say the striking aspect is sometimes the most favourite. But obviously, the ground game's probably one of the most important for me. I love training in the jiu-jitsu game. Obviously, MMA as a whole is a very hard sport. But once if you're in love with the game, obviously, every training session you're gonna love. Which martial arts would you say is your favorite out of the lot?
It's definitely a difficult question. If I do jujitsu every day for an extended period of time, then I get a little bit tired of jujitsu. Yeah. Same with wrestling and Muay Thai and stuff like that. So I just try to make sure I vary it up, and every week I'm kind of doing striking, then jujitsu, then striking, then wrestling. I mix it up like that, and that way, I don't really ever get tired of each discipline. But if I ever get an injury or something, and maybe I can't wrestle for a couple weeks or something, I definitely start to miss it. So yeah, I definitely like to work on the ground game and the stand-up stuff, and do it equally if I can.
Which would you say is the most important mixed martial arts when competing in MMA?
It really seems like wrestling goes. If you're a high level wrestler, you can kind of. Some people are able to bypass striking almost. Ben Askren almost made a career out of it.
Yeah.
Being able to get in and take people down and put them where you want them and control them there. It's even for high level kickboxers, it's a harder transition because you got to learn the takedown defense, which takes a long time. Sometimes you have to adjust your footwork and stuff like that. Whereas I find wrestling, even if you didn't have anything else, I mean, you need some submission defense and stuff like that. But I feel like wrestling is the easiest transition. Mm-hmm. And the mentality that a lot of wrestlers have from the wrestling room and from training, I think it really prepares them, for a very tough and grueling sport such as mixed martial arts.
Would you say the mental aspect of fighting is more important than the physical?
Yes. Now you need the physical in order to even get in the door, but I find that it's the mentality that sets the levels. There's some great athletes that get into mixed martial arts coming over from NFL and other sports and stuff like that. And yeah, they're amazing athletes in great shape. But, once the going gets tough, some people crack, A lot of people go in there and they don't mind beating somebody up. But if they've got to take a few shots, sometimes they fold a little bit. I think we maybe even saw a little bit of that from Conor on Saturday when he took those kicks. You just saw him change instantly. As soon as he ate those first couple calf kicks, he wasn't the same guy. He started out, he was raring to go. He was an animal. And then, he landed a couple of hard shots. Dustin was still standing there. And then Dustin started hitting him back with leg kicks and stuff. And you just saw Conor kind of change.
Well, before we go back onto you talking about the Conor fight, was you surprised with the result, or did you know that was in Dustin's locker to knock Conor out?
I was definitely surprised. I had predicted Conor to win. I figured under 3 minutes with a knockout, and it looked like it. He came out very hard, throwing big punches and stuff. But Dustin was able to get that early takedown and kind of grind Conor out for a little bit. And then going into that second round, once Dustin started landing those leg kicks, then it seemed like Conor was already out of the fight.
Do you think we'll see Conor back in the octagon this year, or do you think he'll either venture into boxing or retire fully?
I think we'll see him back in there. Again, it's just if he gets the right fight, but I know he's probably itching to get back in there and kind of redeem himself. I know he'd like the Poirier rematch, or there's always the Nick Diaz trilogy to finish up. So he's got some options left. As long as he's going to, I feel like he put in the work. He looked like he was in great shape, and I'm sure he trained hard. He's just going to have to address those leg kicks. And we didn't really get a chance to see how his cardio was in this one. It kind of all came down to those leg kicks. So if he can address those, and we'll see how he does in his next fight. But I know his coach was saying he wants to come back in right away. And I know Conor definitely, wants to get that back. So, I think he'll be back this year for sure.
Well, from a fan's perspective, who would you like to see Conor against? Because I threw a name out there straight away for us UK guys Sunday morning. I'd love to see Dan Hooker and Conor McGregor throw it down, both guys coming off the loss, and I think that one would be an interesting fight.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense, too. I think it'd be a good fight because Hooker is more of a stand-up guy. And I think it's a nice level of competition for Conor, see if he's going to come back in and be the old Conor.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people are looking at that Nate Diaz rematch, and I think kind of maybe that or Hooker is a good one. But I don't know if the Poirier trilogy is really a great idea right now. I think Conor's kind of go and fight a couple more times, get some more ring time in too, because that was the first time he's fought in a while. So I think just get some more ring time, work on checking that kick before he goes against Dustin again.
Well, I'll come back to you now. I know you went pro all the way back in 2012, I think it was now, which is good 9 years this year. How was the transition from amateur fighting to the professional game? Because I know the US MMA scene is a lot different to what it is for us UK guys over here.
Yeah, so it wasn't too big of a transition. I did 10 amateur MMA fights.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the rules vary a lot. Sometimes, I'd be in like Pennsylvania and you wore shin pads, but you wore normal MMA gloves.
Yeah.
And it was full MMA rules, except on the ground, you couldn't punch them in the head. So if you knocked them down, you could only hit the body or something like that.
Yeah.
I did some that was just MMA gloves, no shin guards. You were allowed knees, elbows, everything. The only difference was the length of the rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pretty easy transition for me. I had a lot of experience by that time in amateur kickboxing and amateur MMA and stuff and jiu-jitsu tournaments. So it was pretty seamless for me.
Well, I know obviously your UFC debut did not go the way you planned, but before we talk about that, how did it come about you getting the UFC contracts? I know quite a lot of the fighters within the UFC have their own different roads to the UFC. How did it come about for you?
Yeah, it was just the UFC was here in Toronto, fairly close to my hometown. So we were I got ready just in case I was going to be like a last round replacement or something like that. And then I believe we were like a week and a half out. Somebody got hurt and they brought somebody else in. So they had a different replacement. And I was like, well, I guess that was kind of my only shot. So, I kind of relaxed, took some time off training. And then it was like 3 days before the fight, they called us. And, the last guy that they called in on short notice couldn't make weight. And so the fight was at 155. And again, I was walking around a little bit lighter back then. So I was able to make that 155 on just a couple of days' notice.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in. I felt like I performed well against Diego Ferreira. I thought I won that first round. I thought I almost finished him. I hurt him with the body, hurt him to the head, and we've seen him go on and see how tough he is now. He's a top 10.
Yeah.
And so I think I performed well, just with only coming in off of a few days' notice and not really much no training camp at all. Unfortunately, going into that second round again, I got super tired, and Diego was kind of able to take over.
With how well you did perform in your UFC debut, with it only being on a few days' notice, did that kind of make you feel? Obviously, it's not going to make you feel better, but did that make you feel a bit more positive after the result? Obviously, 3 days' notice, it obviously didn't go your way, but with it being 3 days' notice and the fight you did put up, did that make you feel a bit better within the result?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 3 days' notice, I was fighting up a weight class at the time. And I felt like I did really well in that first round. I felt like I showcased a lot of my skills. And then it kind of just came down to conditioning because I didn't really have time to get ready. Again, I feel like if I was in a fight camp and ready, I would have been able to maintain that same pace for the whole fight. And I don't think Diego would have been able to absorb those strikes for the full fight.
Well, I know your first UFC win came against Polo Reyes. How did it feel getting a win in the biggest organization within MMA?
I know it was kind of the dream come true. Making into the UFC obviously was a huge deal, but I don't really, consider myself having made it into the UFC until you've got at least a UFC win.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a lot of hard work and a lot of dreams kind of coming true, all at one time. So it was definitely very exciting and when I was able to, go out and finish them in, a minute and a half or something like that was very exciting. So, yeah.
Well, within a lot of fighters' career, there's only a select few that ever go undefeated. Obviously, losses are bound to be part of the game. How do you personally handle with them? Because I know everyone has their own different ways.
Yeah, I mean, once we're done the fight, again, we're usually still in a hotel in Vegas or whatever. It's just go back, relax for a day or so, and then I'll sit down with my coaches and we'll kind of break down where we went wrong. Whether there was some certain skills that we were missing, or if it was a conditioning thing or something like that. Then we'll break that down and figure out what's wrong. And then when we get back to training, we just fix what was wrong. And that's usually super helpful. And then once we fix what was wrong, then we can move on to the next fight.
I'll go back to the Billy Quarantillo fight. Obviously, he was only able to fight once during last year. How different was that fight week compared to a usual fight week that you've had before?
It was fairly different. Again, I was off for about a year. I won the fight in Mexico City in September, and then I was ready and no injuries and was hoping for a fight, but really didn't get anything until the year later when I fought Billy. And when that was in like COVID times, like right now, so it was definitely interesting. A lot of COVID tests. We had to go down there a little bit early. We had to stay in a hotel. We weren't really allowed to leave or do much. It was hard to to get much cardio in or do a whole lot of training while we were there. But yeah, and then fighting in front of a no crowd was a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, I'm still glad I got to fight, and I'd definitely fight in the same scenario again.
During the quarantine period where you was in Vegas, what did you do to keep yourself occupied? Because I know everyone had their own ways. Did you train in your room, or did you do other stuff to keep you occupied?
Yeah. I mean, just try and train, hit pads a little bit. We had an exercise room, and yeah, so I brought my two head coaches and a training partner, so I was able to stay busy with that. And then other than that, it was fight week, so just try and rest and recover and stuff, and worry about the weight.
I know you had a fight in, I think, June last year that ended up getting cancelled. How do you feel after that was cancelled? Obviously, you couldn't do anything about it, but how was that being having a fight cancelled?
That one really sucked. I stayed in shape basically since the Mexico fight in September, and I stayed in great shape. Was ready to go, and then we finally got that fight in June, and so I was like, okay, well, staying in shape, working this hard all year round, making all these sacrifices, not taking any time off, and we finally got a fight. It was on like 2 weeks' notice, and I was ready to go, so we got all ramped up. And then the week before, like the day before I was supposed to fly out, the UFC let me know that they were unable to get me kind of a working visa to go in the States. And I think just with COVID and stuff, everything was all backed up. And because I took the fight on short notice, it just really didn't give them time to put the visa together. So yes, that fight fell through. And then, after I lost that one, I was like, well, I've trained, this whole year, haven't taken any time off. Injuries are starting to add up and stuff. So I decided to take some time off, spend some extra time with the family and stuff like that. And then, of course, as soon as I took some time off and gained a little bit of weight, that's when we got the call to go fight Billy.
Well, I think in your professional career, you've had 4 submission, 5 TKO finishes, I think. When you're I know everyone thinks differently, but when you're in a fight, do you go looking for the finish, or if the finish is there, do you take it?
I definitely go looking, especially in the UFC. I feel like, you're there to put on a show and entertain the fans. And I know I have finishing power. I know I can knock people out and stuff like that. So that's what I move forward to do. I've had to start being a little bit smarter about it and not, going, dump my entire gas tank in the first round, trying to knock someone out. So I've learned, where to pace myself a little bit. But yeah, definitely, I'm always looking for the finish.
For our viewers over in the UK that aren't too familiar with every fighter in the UFC, what tool is the best in your arsenal, would you say?
Probably I would say my power. I mean, it's a little general, I guess, but I find my power really helps me, with the striking, able to land big shots, and on the ground, it's something, when guys kind of tie up with me, whether it's in the clinch or wrestling or stuff like that. I think they really underestimate my power, my strength. So I think that's kind of helped me get to where I am.
Well, out of all the guys that train with you at your gym, who pushes you most on a daily basis?
So again, there's lots of guys. We have Shane Campbell. He's fought in the UFC a few times. Fought Muay Thai all over the world and stuff like that. So he's definitely always great to have with me for sparring and stuff, big glove sparring and MMA sparring. And he's also no slouch on the ground. So, I get to work with him a lot. Mustafa definitely helps me a ton. Again, he's maybe a little bit bigger than me, but about my size. And again, he's able to push me in sparring and in wrestling, stuff like that. So that goes a long way for me.
Well, out of everyone that you've ever trained with, even if that's going to another gym to have a few sessions with other guys, who's been the best, not the best, well, yeah, I'll word it like that. Who's been the best fighter that you've ever trained with personally?
I think I think it's probably Shane. I think the best, all around. There's some guys that I've trained with that have been amazing wrestlers or great jiu-jitsu practitioners. But as far as MMA and as a whole and as a sport, yeah, I'd probably go with Shane Campbell.
Well, out of everybody you've fought with, if that's amateur or professional, who's the toughest opponent you've ever had?
I think the toughest opponent was probably my first loss before I was in the UFC. I fought a guy named Adrian Hadjibij. He was coming down from welterweight. I was going up from featherweight. We met at 155 for a title fight, and went all 5 rounds. Went to a decision, and he ended up winning the decision. I felt like I was more skilled on the ground and more skilled standing up. It was just really his style. He had kind of almost like a Machida style, where he was able to kind of hit and move. And then yeah, so I was still able to land my shots and take him down and stuff like that. But just the way he was able to kind of land and move was very difficult for me to figure out. And I think that's kind of what won him the decision in the end.
Well, I'm going to ask for one prediction. Now, with the division that you're leaving, there's obviously the title fight come UFC 260. Alexander Volkanovski and Brian Ortega. Who do you have winning that fight?
I think it's probably going to be a close decision again. And I think Volkanovski will win. But yeah, I mean, seeing Ortega striking against the Korean Zombie was very impressive and exciting to see how far his striking has come, especially since his fight against Max. So, I mean, Brian Ortega has great jiu-jitsu, great ground game and good stand-up. But I think the way Volkanovski kind of puts stuff together and his striking, I don't know if I'd say it's better, but I think the way he's going to use it, he's going to be able to eke out another decision win like he did against Holloway.
Well, I'll go back to you now. A career of yours that spans well over 10 years, I believe. So there's going to be many moments, ups and downs. We'll get onto them both. But which has been your favorite moment of your career so far?
Definitely the win in UFC Mexico, because I feel like all the work that I've put in was kind of leading to a moment like that, and it kind of for everyone that said, oh, I couldn't make it from a small town, or I wasn't good enough to be in the UFC and stuff like that. I feel like that proved everyone wrong. So that was definitely one of my favorite moments.
Is there anything in your career that you regret up to this point?
I don't know if there's anything I regret because everything's kind of got me to where I am. If I could go back and redo some stuff, I definitely would. But I mean, it's all really just been skill-wise. I've been happy with my career. It's more or less just conditioning, I think, and then the short notice fights when I'm not conditioned the best. I think those are, some of my regrets, wishing I stayed maybe in, fight shape year round, which is extremely difficult. And I mean, you get a lot of injuries and stuff. There's a lot of sacrifice and stuff like that. But if I was able to know about the fight, then, I'd go back and be in better shape. And I think, I would have won most of, if not all the fights that I've lost.
Well, obviously, most fighters make sacrifices throughout their career. What's the biggest sacrifice you've had to make up to date?
So I guess the biggest sacrifice for me is, really just getting to training. So again, I'm from a small town in Huntsville, Ontario, Canada. So there is no real training there. So I have to come down to Stony Creek, which is about a 3-hour drive. And so I can't just come down and back every day to go back and forth to my house. So I come down here, and I'm usually down here 5 or 6 days a week. And that's, 5 or 6 days away from, my family, my kids, everything like that. So it's, that's definitely a huge sacrifice for me, not to see my kids and family every day.
Well, this is something I'm always intrigued in. A lot of obviously, you said you've got kids there. A lot of fighters would not like to see the children inside the cage, but say 10, 11, 12 years at time, your child comes to you and says, Dad, I want to do what you do, basically. Would you support that decision, or would you try and edge them away from that?
I would support them in it. I would help them train and help them be the best they could be. But I mean, if they're going to get into sports, I think there's better financial reward in other sports. I think this sport is very difficult, very taxing and demanding on your body. And, once you're done the sport, a lot of times, a lot of fighters really they finish the sport without any money or anything to show for it, and they've severely hindered the quality of life that they're going to have after this. So, I mean, I would sit my son down and talk to him about that, and make sure he understands it, and make sure he's okay. Working a couple different jobs while he's training as a professional athlete to help support himself, and always have a backup plan. But I mean, if his heart's set on it, then yeah, I'm definitely going to support him.
Well, before the COVID pandemic hit, what would be your fight routine for the week leading up to a fight?
So leading up to a fight, again, because I was cutting down to 145, I would usually do 2 hours of cardio. So I would wake up, do an hour of cardio in the morning, and then we would do sport-specific training for an hour. And again, depending on the day, it kind of switches up. Then I would, eat and maybe have a nap or something. Then I would do an hour on the bike of cardio. And then we're going to get into another sport-specific training session. And this one's usually, 2 hours long. And then, that's the average day for 6 days a week. And then on that seventh day, I would still do, an hour or two of cardio. So I would train every day. Just one day, like my rest day, is just cardio, and every other day is 2 or 3 sport-specific training sessions.
Well, within the UFC at the moment, whether that if you want to go back to featherweight at any point, or you could choose to stay at lightweight, is there a dream matchup that you'd like within the next few years?
I mean, one matchup I would love is Diego Sanchez. I came into the sport watching Diego. He's stuck around this long. I would love to, get in there and fight him. And I don't think he's sticking around too much longer. So, I mean, if I could get that sooner than later, that'd be awesome. But yeah, it would be definitely cool to get in the octagon with somebody that I started watching the sport with and have been a fan of his career for this whole time.
Yeah, I've seen somewhere that I think he's looking at maybe having one more fight. So would you be down for being Diego Sanchez's last opponent?
Yeah, absolutely. And, if he wants to do it at 170, I think he's been fighting at 170 lately. We could go up there, 155, whatever works for him, I'm down.
Well, I know we spoke about it earlier about how different a fight week is, but what was it like fighting in an empty octagon, an empty arena against Billy?
It was a lot like training. When we go to training, I usually have my coaches. They're octagon side when I'm sparring, and it's very similar when I'm doing my sparring rounds. My coaches are there yelling out instructions and stuff like that, and then in between rounds they come in with the water. So it's very similar to an actual fight, just without the crowd. And now this time fighting without the crowd, it was almost the exact same, but it was very cool that I could hear them so clearly and be able to do what they say.
Well, this is a question my co-host tends to ask a lot of MMA stars. Do you think the sport of MMA will eventually be bigger than boxing, or do you believe they're already there? Because I know a lot of the time when people say, are you watching the fight at the weekend? Nowadays, I think a lot of the time they're referring to the UFC prior to boxing.
Yeah, it depends on where you go in the world. I think in Canada here, the UFC is definitely bigger. Boxing is still kind of popular with the older generations, but with boxing, it kind of comes and goes so much. When you have like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, and then it got big for a little bit, but after that fight, everything kind of dies off for a bit, and so boxing kind of comes and goes with its stars, I think. And right now, I don't know of any big boxing fights coming up, but I know about all the UFC fights, and everyone I talk to or hang out with is UFC fan.
Well, with you being Canadian yourself, obviously one of the most famous UFC fighters of all time, George St. Pierre's, obviously from Canada. Would you say you've taken inspiration from George?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I started watching the UFC through the Ultimate Fighter's first season. But once I started watching the UFC, then, I saw, there was David Loiseau and George St. Pierre were kind of the Canadians at the time. And obviously with George doing so well, I paid, more attention to him. And then as I got older, I was able to go out to TriStar and train with him on a few different occasions. And yeah, definitely been a role model.
Who would you say you've looked up to the most within your MMA career?
Yeah, definitely George. I think he not only is he a great fighter, he's very smart about how he fights, how he trains. I think he's a great role model in all aspects of it. A great martial artist and a great person. Was never much for trash talking, or anything like that. So I think overall he was the best role model to look up to, and I still consider him probably the best pound for pound.
Would you say you ever get nervous before fights, and if so, which one has you been nervous the most for?
No, I don't really get nervous for fights. Earlier on in my career, I think I did. It's like my first professional MMA fight. I was a little nervous because then everything's going on your pro record. But I did so many jiu-jitsu competitions and so many kickboxing, amateur kickboxing fights, and amateur MMA that I competed so much by the time I turned pro that it wasn't as big of a deal for me.
Well, I've just got a few prediction questions now for you with some of the upcoming UFC fights. Obviously, we've spoke about the Alex Volkanovski fight. We did speak about the Conor McGregor fight that happened last weekend. One more fight that's already happened I wanted to ask you about is the Michael Chandler and Dan Hooker. What did you make of that bout?
I thought it was an awesome fight. I had picked Michael Chandler. I thought he was going to come over and upset Dan Hooker. Everybody that was kind of a UFC fan knew Dan Hooker and saw some of the wars he was in, so everybody was heavily favoring him. But I knew, Michael Chandler. He's been in some really tough fights. Got great wrestling. Great stand-up, hits really hard. So I thought it was going to be a war, but I thought Chandler was going to win the decision. Definitely didn't see that knockout coming like that, but it was interesting the way Hooker was circling away and kind of avoiding the fight for so long. It seemed like Hooker never really even got in the fight. Chandler was just kind of able to come in and take over, and then land that big left hook and knock him out.
Well, we've already spoke about this earlier on, but we'll just go over it again quickly. Who would you like to see Conor fight next, Kyle?
Yeah, so next fight, now that you mentioned it, I think I like that Dan Hooker fight. They're both coming off a loss. See where they going to go from here. If not Dan Hooker, because I know Conor likes big names and big fights and likes to make a lot of money. Then it would be Nate Diaz. I think would be the other option because again the trilogy. Everybody's going to tune in. I think he could be the main event and all that stuff and make all his money, or as opposed to the fight against Dan Hooker might not be as big of a deal, and he might not get that main event status.
Well, I'm just going to go over some of the fights coming up on the next few pay-per-views. UFC 258 next month. Gilbert Burns against Kamaru Usman for the welterweight title. Who do you have winning that one? Because I think I've spoke about this a few times. I think my co-host believes Gilbert Burns is going to take this. I've got Kamaru Usman. Who do you have?
I've got Gilbert Burns.
Mm-hmm.
Just seeing after some of Usman's last few fights and hearing about some of his training problems. His knees are really bad. It's hard for him to run. I think he's got a lot of miles on his body, and I think the longer he competes, I think the worse he's going to be able to compete. And I think the way Gilbert Burns, with his ground game, like his big submission and jiu-jitsu background, I think is going to help him kind of nullify Usman's wrestling. And then I think stand-up wise, I think Gilbert Burns is a little bit better striker. So I think we should see Burns kind of beat Usman all around. I don't think he'll be able to finish him. I think Usman will be a little too tough to finish, but I think we'll see Burns by decision.
Well, Niall's got another question. When do you think we'll see you back in the octagon? I know we spoke about it before, but again for Niall, when do you think we'll see you back?
So hopefully March or April. So, really soon. My manager messaged the UFC today. So hopefully we'll hear back soon. And try and get in there. I'm in shape right now and I'm ready to go now. So, the sooner the better. But hopefully no later than April.
Yeah, I think there's two more pay-per-views of the main fights I just want to cover now. Obviously, UFC 259 completely stacked top to bottom. Obviously, who do you have winning the Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling fight?
That one's super tricky. I think after seeing Aljamain Sterling get knocked out by Marlon Moraes and stuff like that, and have some tough fights, I think I'm going to stick with Petr Yan. Mm-hmm. Just his boxing and stuff, he seems to be really well put together all around, and I just don't see what hole in Jan's game that Aljamain Sterling's going to be able to take advantage of. So I think we might even see a finish, Peter Yan by knockout or TKO in the third round, I think.
Well, UFC 259 and the top of the bill, we've got Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight title. Do you think we see a new champ?
I'm not sure. It's this one's very tricky because the way Stylebender works, he's able to generally avoid power and land some good combinations and long strikes and stuff. But we've seen Stylebender get knocked out before. It was in kickboxing, so I mean he's undefeated in mixed martial arts. But I think if Blachowicz can hit him, I think Blachowicz just comes with so much power, especially after watching his last fight against Dominic Reyes. He just has so much power that I think if he's able to close the distance and maybe put Stylebender on the fence or something like that and land a shot, I think we could see Blachowicz getting that knockout. But if he can't really do that in the first round, then I think Stylebender will take over. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and pick. I'm gonna go with Blachowicz in the first round by KO.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I know obviously a lot of people are expecting Izzy to become new champ and then potentially chase John Jones up to heavyweight. But now UFC 260, I know we've spoke about the Alexander Volkanovski fight. There's a mid-ranking clash between Jimmy Crute and Johnny Walker. Do you have a prediction for this one?
I'm gonna go with Jimmy Crute. I like Johnny Walker. I've met him and stuff, and he's a super entertaining and fun guy. Just his style is so reckless, that he kind of he'll knock the guy out or get knocked out. But as he kind of climbs the rankings in the UFC, we see him if he gets against somebody that's good, like a sniper, a good striker. They see those big holes in his game and they're able to hit him and put him down. He doesn't have a great chin, I don't think. So yeah, I don't think we're gonna see him win.
Well, obviously we've spoke about two of the fights now on UFC 260. The main event, is it going to be repeat or revenge for Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic too?
I think Francis is going to be able to win this one. I think last time Francis was able to survive. He never really got finished, which is a big deal in this fight because every time he gets up, he's got that opportunity again to land those big shots. And now we've seen DC was able to catch Miocic and knock him out. So maybe as Miocic gets a little bit older, maybe he's losing a bit of his chin, starting to slow down a little bit. And I think that's going to be the hole that Francis is going to be able to take advantage of. He doesn't come in super technical. He kind of throws a while, but there's just so much power. And now that we've seen Miocic kind of get knocked out like that, then I think we're going to see a new champion.
Two more things from me. Do you think we'll see John Jones become heavyweight champion this year?
I don't know about. Well, I guess it sounds like he's going to be fighting the winner of Stipe and Francis. It's so hard to say how he's going to do. I mean, if he fights Francis, he's going to need to take him down because John got hit with some big shots, against Dominic Reyes and some other guys. And I think if Francis lands those kind of shots on him, I don't think Jones will be able to survive it. So he'll have to be able to take him down, and maybe he can do that and submit him. But if he can't take him down, then yeah, I would say Francis is going to win. And if he fights Stipe, if Stipe keeps the belt, I think Stipe is maybe even a worse opponent for John because Stipe, I think, has got a little better defensive wrestling. And yeah, I think he'll be able to stuff the takedowns and be able to land the big shots and put John out also. So I think John's best bet is to wrestle Ngannou and hope for the best, but I don't see it going all that well.
Well, last thing from me, like a lot of people are hoping to make a career, well, not a career, but looking to compete in MMA. If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Train hard. I mean, find the best MMA gym you can find, and then train as hard as you can. And sometimes you feel like you're training at your limit, but just keep pushing because the harder you train, eventually you find another level, and then you're able to train up to that level, and you're able to push yourself that much harder. So just keep training as hard as possible, and then find a good gym, and then the coach is going to be able to help you get fights and stuff like that. But I mean, it all falls on your own self-discipline to push.
Well, I'm Mason Shatwell, and you're Kyle the Monster Nelson. I just wanted to say thank you for coming on, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.